Yes, ma'am.
Can I make a quick announcement?
Yes.
Casey's got her publishable paper done. It was approved, so she's
Good.
step closer to the whole thing.
Whew. Slow steps, right? Little steps. Getting there. Baby steps, right? Hello, my name is Casey Yu, and I know most of you, a lot of you are, or some of you are new faces to me. Hi, come on in. I am a 1,000-year doctoral candidate at this point. Okay, we've only been here a handful of years. And so my presentation today is in two parts. The first part will be sort of research in progress and where I am with my dissertation so far, photo voice of the Cesarean experience, and I'll explain that. And then the second half deals with what I've been also occupying myself with this past academic year. I was hired as an assistant professor at North-South University in Dhaka, Bangladesh, which is 10 hours ahead of us in the future at this moment. So I want to talk to you about those experiences because I teach technology in Bangladesh, and it's been an amazing and frustrating and amazing experience so far. So I'm going to share some information about both of those experiences with you. So, photo voice of the Cesarean experience. What we're going to talk about today is the purpose of my dissertation, the theoretical model that I've developed in order to further explore a couple of concepts that I'll share with you momentarily, talk to you about my research questions, share with you where I am in the midst of this data collection and some of the initial findings that I've come across and what I'm going to be doing from this point forward. So the purpose of, the original purpose of this research was in part inspired by the birth of my youngest, who was born via cesarean after a difficult pregnancy and born early, which necessitated a long hospital stay. And so in terms of my research, when I was looking into preparing for his birth, one of the things that I came across was that in the United States, cesarean sections account for about 30% of all of the births that occur. The World Health Organization has recommended that in an ideal situation, only between 5 and 10% of all births should be done via cesarean section. And so there's a big discrepancy between what is ideal and what has been done. And so that's what I wanted to sort of start teasing out, knowing that I can't answer that entire question about why. One of the things I wanted to learn was how mothers gain and share knowledge using from their cesarean experiences using camera phone photography, which also draws into my other interests in terms of photography as a profession before I started this doctoral program, and has sort of persisted in this way throughout. So the theoretical model that I developed combines two specific other theories that come into play. The first is authoritative knowledge by Brigitte Jordan, and she spoke a lot about how knowledge is formed and shared and considered authoritative through the lens of birth. And then the second one, excuse me, that I will be talking about is photo voice, and then my twist on it is using camera phone photography instead of the traditional film photography that has been done before in the past. And photo voice combines three specific influences to give it, to lend itself strength as a visual research method. The first is empowerment education by Paulo Freire, who talked about how sharing these experiences and including everybody's voices was vital in terms of empowering people to educate others and propel themselves forward within society. Three feminist theories that talk about the importance of including the female voice within research methodologies. And then the final being documentary photography, and in my instance, camera phone photography, and that talks about the power of the visual image to help bring forth voices that are not traditionally heard. So what I developed was, after looking at both of these research methods, they seem to fit together in a very purposeful way. And so I tried to combine them together as much as possible here. Thank you. in the authoritative camera phone knowledge model. This synthesizes key elements of authoritative knowledge and photo voice, combining elements in each model which complement each other. As it is currently structured, the model demonstrates sharing and seeking of knowledge by women and the major influences to that knowledge gaining and sharing based on cultural and personal authoritative knowledge of pregnancy and birth. So from the top circle, women seeking and sharing knowledge, proceeding counterclockwise, the relationship of knowledge sharing and seeking from the birth professional circles to the woman herself visually demonstrates the impact of that knowledge. It's considered the most privileged and the most authoritative knowledge that drives much of the decision making during the course of a woman's pregnancy and childbirth. In contrast, the arrow from the woman to the birth professionals circle demonstrates this disparity of the amount of knowledge imparted by women to their birth professionals and the overall legitimacy of that knowledge within the model of pregnancy and birth. So likewise, the relationship between birth professionals and the original woman's peers and family, which is in the bottom circle there, is influenced by the authoritative knowledge imparted by birth professionals. Peers and family have also received knowledge from their own medical and healthcare providers and have their own knowledge based on their experiences and listening to stories from others. But ultimately, women who are undergoing or who are pregnant or seeking or planning for childbirth will depend on their birth professionals and privilege that information above and beyond all others. The model continues counterclockwise. Women, the other circle on the opposite side is fairly small, demonstrating the amount of knowledge that tends to get shared in that area, which is the women's own research and knowledge. And that I've designated as sources that are non-social, static sites or websites, or posters that they might see at the doctor's office, things that they might not be able to directly interact with as opposed to the other resources. So the model itself that I've been working with sort of bypasses the other two circles and goes through over here using the camera phone as the method of delivery of bringing forth images that help women talk about their any concerns or knowledge that they have about childbirth that they share directly with their peers and family. Okay. So the three research questions that I'm seeking to answer here. The first is, what do mothers who have undergone cesarean sections learn from their cesarean birth experiences? The second, what knowledge about cesarean birth do mothers who have undergone cesarean sections share with other mothers who have also undergone cesarean birth experiences? And lastly, how can using camera phone photography enable mothers who have undergone cesarean sections to share and gain knowledge with and from other mothers who have also undergone cesarean birth experiences? So here is the methodology in progress. About a year ago, I did a pilot study, so that has been, what I'm doing now has been heavily influenced by that. It looks a lot different now than it did when I did the pilot study, so I'll tell you about what I've been doing now. I am aiming for 30 participants to complete the entire process, and I'm at 21 now, so I've got 9 more to go. And I've solicited their feedback through Facebook parenting groups and largely word of mouth. I've used Google Hangouts on Air to conduct video training sessions, 2 video training sessions. The first one deals with sort of orienting them to the project at hand. What is photo voice? What am I trying to gain through this research project? And then the second one talks to them about ethics behind photography, being safe as a photographer if they're putting themselves in potentially not safe situations. And a large section of that also taught them how to, some tips and tricks on using their camera phones to achieve the image that they want to portray within the session. So participants at that point they take photos, they upload them to a secure site, and then they type a narrative about their image in question, and I'll share those questions with you in the next slide. And then they have about a week to complete that, and then they meet for a final debrief session as a group. So far we've had about say 6 debrief sessions with participants anywhere between 2 participants in a session to 6 participants in a session. And 6 is probably the max I would go in terms of the freedom of comfort that people have experienced in terms of talking with each other. The data is then transcribed and coded according to the authoritative camera phone knowledge model, where I identify instances of women talking about the experiences that they've shared with their birth professionals or from their birth professionals with other sites or peers. And then the final part of the photo voice research method indicates to sort of round out the empowerment education piece of this, is to have a public display of the images and the narratives in question. And how it's been done in the past is the images are printed out and placed on a public display, kind of like at an art gallery, but because I'm not close by, and my population is further from me than I'd like, and as well because halfway through as I was collecting data, I opened up the search to all women across the United States. We couldn't find one specific location, so what I will be doing is posting them online with a copy of their narrative for people to see, so that participants can share as they will. And I've also asked participants to send me names of people within their community who they think should see this image, and then I'll send them a link to the final gallery once it's up. So the questions that they are being asked to complete when they upload the photos are as such. And it's the showed model, and this model of questions was asked in other photo voice administrations within the realm of visual anthropology and in healthcare administrations. The first question is, what do you see here? The second, what is really happening here? How does this relate to our lives? Why does this situation, concern, or strength exist? And what can we do about it? So during the debrief session, I display the image, and then I read aloud what they have shared with their narrative, and then allow the participants to talk about what they have seen. So some people might talk about the image and what that image means for them, or the person who took the photo might then say, talk a little bit more about that, like why they decided to choose it, or so a couple of people shared like why they felt a little anxious about sharing this image, and then other people sort of responded, and then the conversation kind of bounced back and forth at that point. So here's an example of one picture that was taken. All of the photos that were in here so far, I should have said earlier, are from this past administration of my research here. So the caption that she gave this was, a woman's stomach and her hand holding a lemon. The mother is exposing her stretch marks, belly shelf, floppy belly button. She is saying that this is a part of her, a new part that came with becoming a mother. And she's telling us her body is perfect, not a lemon. It reminds us that there is no wrong way to have a body, or have a body, that our bodies tell the stories of our lives. Cesarean birth creates unique lines and edges and scars, inside and out. We all have a story to tell, and our bodies stand as illustrations. Your body is not a lemon, a quote by Ina May Gaskin. Our bodies can be sliced open, organs displayed, a human tugged out, organs replaced, sewn shut with little evidence for future reference. The strength lies in our understanding that we are whole and useful and not broken, not less than and not wrong. We can witness for one another. We can show our scars and honor them. We can thank our scars and marks and belly flaps for being a part of who we are, and we can love ourselves. And this is another image. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but this is if you've given birth in Tallahassee, at Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, this is a common sight that comes through. The challenging part for this picture, in terms of summarizing this, is that right underneath this photo over here, there's a little button where you can press, and a song chimes out throughout the labor and delivery unit, and for a while it also piped into the NICU. The difficulty here is not all women get to press that button and indicate that there was a birth, and then women who have experienced either tragedy during birth or difficult birth experience may not ever get to press that button. So that brings up a lot of memories and hard feelings, especially as they hear it in other places. So some of the initial findings from my research so far is that the initial findings indicate that knowledge was shared using camera phone photography in the context of the study. And it occurred in several ways. The first was knowledge from birth professionals to mothers was shared during using participant-elicited photography to inspire the discussion. The photographs described, represented, and contributed to the knowledge mothers gained from their birth professionals. They discussed what it was like. Well, they discussed what they learned from their respective birth professionals, and as well as the emotions that they felt contributed to their current feelings about cesarean births. The second way they shared knowledge using camera phone photography was the knowledge they gained from their peers, both positive and negative. The discussion on birth centered on their perceptions of others' intentions, purposeful and inadvertent, with regards to sharing their own birth experience or their own experiences about birth, and how the variety of stories they'd heard had impacted their desires for a vaginal birth or to be treated with more compassion after undergoing a cesarean. Furthermore, discussion in the group strengthened their own resolve to treat others who had undergone a cesarean with more compassion than they felt they were given. This photograph over here was a compilation that one of the participants gave. Her husband had surgery to remove part of his intestines, and she had an emergency cesarean with a vertical cut. So after she had her surgery, they now had matching scars. And so they sort of bonded through that in a way that many couples actually don't get to experience after birth. The other way in which knowledge was shared using camera phone photography was demonstrated, I feel, best in this particular image. This is a picture of a bulletin board at one woman's work where she had placed these micro brochures over here called VBAC Facts that had information on women for women who were interested in pursuing a vaginal birth after cesarean, because it's still, especially in Tallahassee, not as accepted by the vast majority of the medical professionals here to even want to attempt a vaginal birth. And so there's a lot of potential misinformation or misunderstanding of the facts. And so this brochure has a handful of questions that encourages mothers who are seeking information about vaginal birth after cesarean to go bring to their medical practitioners to talk to them about. And so the participant took a picture of this and said that she had initially put 5 cards up there. There's only 2 left, and she intends to replace those cards once they're done. And it was a good example when I saw this image of knowledge that can be shared in a static way on the terms of both the giver as well as the receiver of that knowledge. So far this study has tentatively demonstrated that participants were able to use the images they've created to explore and share their own knowledge about childbirth and cesarean sections, as well as gain knowledge from their peers in that same regard. So moving forward, this study has also helped me identify better practices in terms of collecting the data with regards to conducting this research. The first thing I would like to do is to continue to explore ways to reduce the number of contact points between when I initially make contact with an interested participant to when they actually complete the process entirely. The first time, well, they have to fill out an application form to see if they qualify for the study. And then there's scheduling that's involved in terms of finding a good time for them to make the first training session, and then the second training session, and then the final debrief session. And it's driving me completely crazy. Working with people has been, I know you would totally never flake out on me, but yet there have been people who, for whatever reason, they don't complete the process. And so that's one of the reasons why I extended the search to the entire US to gain more participants. The frustrating part of that is not knowing exactly from any given time what's going to be the part or the point in the process that indicates to a participant that they don't want to continue anymore. So I could email 20 people and get 3 people who actually finish the entire process, either email 15 and then 6 people go through, and it's been a great experience. And so I'm still trying to figure out ways to sort of reduce the number of times that participants feel like they're obligated to perform for this particular study. So yes, it was like herding cats and it's not been pleasant. I have 9 more people I need to do this for, so soon. And then finally, once I'm done with all of this data collection, I'll be posting all of the photos on a site online that's actually hosted by the FSU Social Media Lab, and alongside their narratives that have all been anonymized. After sending the link out to the participants to get their final okay on the images and the stories that are being shared, and then also getting feedback from them on people that we want to share it to, and then I'll publicize that as well. Okay, that's where I am right now. I'm still in the midst of getting stuff, so if you have any questions or comments about that.
Are you collecting any demographic data?
I am. So far, the vast majority of the women, I would say probably around 90% of the women, have been upper and high class, socioeconomically, yes, and mostly Caucasian women, mostly people who are in either dual income households or households that can accommodate one of the partners staying home with the children. So my initial reaching out was for people who didn't necessarily meet that demographic to get a different perspective. So I had a small handful of divorced mothers, a small handful of widowed mothers who initially reached out. But then that brings in more scheduling challenges as well, especially if they're alone. Most of the mothers, I would say over 90% of the mothers had young children, so bedtime at night when I was collecting the data, it was always kind of hit or miss. So, yeah.
One other question is when you presented the pictures and the narrative, who supplied the narrative?
The photographer.
The photographer. So that wasn't anyone responding to.
No.
Okay.
But I've transcribed like all of the conversations like during the debrief session. So I would read the narrative aloud, and then all of the participants would either respond to the photo or something that resonated with them within the narrative to talk about further at length.
But what we saw was just the authors.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Were there any aspects of this method that you felt you had to change or that you weren't satisfied with? Because you got some really great stuff from that, but is it something that you just think is 100% thumbs up? Or there's some
No, there was definitely some more work to be done. The challenge of, the initial research method used film photography and either had disposable cameras or inexpensive film cameras to give to participants, and then they kept that as a gift afterwards. My initial desire for using camera phone photography is because camera phones have become quite ubiquitous within the culture, at least in the US, definitely Bangladesh, but at least in the US, where people are taking pictures with their phones, and there's a certain amount of power that's lent to having an instant availability of being able to publish an image of something that they're seeing right away. And so I wanted to sort of harness some of that feeling of power within having a device that you can publish images with. I need to figure out a better way for people to upload pictures, in part because the first method that I chose, the uploading, wasn't working right on all of the platforms, and the method that I'm using now, I'm using a Qualtrics survey site now, which is working a little bit better, but there's still some user error that I can't quite replicate. So I'm wondering if I have a generous research grant and one day at my disposal, that I could hire somebody to create different apps for the Android and iPhone operating systems to make it even less of a hassle, because now they have to use the web browser on their phone, and they might, who knows what the status of their web browsers are at any given point. So.
I had one other question. So this is such interesting work, and the piece that you included on there about how a lot of doctors are reluctant to allow women or encourage women who get cesarean sections to, take a different route on their next pregnancy. Do you see this kind of work as potentially raising awareness to the possibility of that option and impacting sort of health
Eventually, yes. I think for the scope of my dissertation, I didn't want to get too far into the health professional angle of it. But again, one day with a generous research grant, let it make it rain, right? I would love to pursue this further and show doctors in communities and saying, this is evidence of what women in your community are interested in and looking for. So that's a definite aspect. And then the other aspect is for women who are perfectly fine with their cesarean experiences, and more so probably educational aspect for other mothers who, they might internalize a lot of their own issues with their cesarean and then not want anybody else to have a cesarean, and just little discussions back and forth, like what the birth experience that somebody has should be regarded as legitimate, however they come about that, and helping everybody sort of come to peace with that experience, whatever it might be, whether it's cesarean, vaginal birth, or whatever. So
yeah, I can even see that if this method becomes, because it is so accessible, just more commonly accepted, or the awareness of it
right.
being useful in other kinds of health interventions, like the decision to have a prophylactic mastectomy or
right.
something like that.
And this has been used more in the healthcare fields. There was one study that I looked at that talked about people who were living with HIV or AIDS and what their home situations were like, and that gave care providers really great data about how they can best assist their clients who are in like late stage AIDS or HIV with their status, help them make good decisions and be better supports for them as well. Yeah.
One last question, Casey. At the very beginning, you talked about the discrepancy between U.S. cesarean rates
Mm-hmm.
and the World Health Organization recommendations.
Right.
So two parts. One, is the U.S., say, one of the only, for lack of a better term, northern or first world country that has these accelerated or larger rates?
No.
So is this maybe a socioeconomic issue? And then what are some of the contributing factors to the 30%?
Sure. So the U.S. is not alone in that large statistic. One particular country that comes to note is Brazil. Most of the women there are encouraged to and end up planning to have cesareans as their first birth experience without even having gone through the laboring. I want to say it's like upwards of 30, but I don't remember off the top of my head. In a lot of more developed countries, that ends up being the case. In Europe, and especially I want to say either Sweden or Norway, they actually have fairly low rates of cesarean. And again, it's under 30. I just can't remember the specific number off the top of my head. But in those instances, midwives and besides obstetricians end up handling the vast majority of the low-risk care that doesn't need a cesarean to sort of finish the birth to start off with. So high-risk people in those countries would go to obstetricians. Low-risk people would continue to be seen by midwives. Whereas in the U.S., most women receive their prenatal care from obstetricians or a group of obstetricians. So they're in some ways already seen by someone who is used to seeing more high-risk pregnancies. The C-section rate spiked quite a bit before the mid-1980s, when there was a resurgence of women who were interested in vaginal births after cesarean. And then there's a big concern of lawsuits that happened because of a handful of really tragic incidents where women probably shouldn't have had vaginal births, then the fetal demise and maternal demise were a result. And so insurance companies and hospitals were very okay, if you've had a cesarean, you'll just keep having cesareans. But there's risks inherent in that as well. I have a friend who just this past week had her 4th cesarean, and she had a hole in her uterus that they found as they were doing her surgery. And so she's done having babies, which she's fine with, but that if she wasn't, that really limits her options because of that initial cesarean that she had. So that's a similar story that I've heard from a lot of people. Like the woman who had the vertical scar, because of the orientation of that scar, she will always have to have a cesarean, which limited her birth options tremendously after that was her first birth experience, where she had that vertical scar. So yes, I've done a little bit of research into Bangladesh and their cesarean rates for personal obvious reasons. And it's similar to the US, but healthcare in Bangladesh is severely stratified by different social statuses. So I suspect that women who can't afford to be in the hospitals that are doing the cesareans, they have bad outcomes without cesareans, or they're just incredibly lucky otherwise. But there's no real hard statistics about that exist at the moment, but I haven't really had a chance to finish because, as I've been told, you need to get your dissertation done. So, yes.